Welcome to the Neighborhood Church Revive podcast. We are so glad that you're joining us today as we unpack big ideas about God's Word together. My name is Sean Thomas. I'm the worship pastor here at Neighborhood Church, and we believe that God's Word is relevant and helpful even for today, which is why we take the time to unpack what we talked about on Sunday and to go over our sermon series. We've been in the series of parables and just talk about things that are going on in the world, like pickleball, Awana, and birds. We have Pastor Jericho joining us today.
I'm here.
He's here.
Bird watcher lover.
That's right. We were having a fun conversation before we started the podcast. So if you have any bird questions, text those in now,
Yes.
And we might answer. Also, we have Pastor Mike Wilson joining us.
Good to be here again.
Yeah, good to see you, Mike. Good to see you guys. It's been a while since we've had Jericho and Mike together on the podcast. We were talking about the Marine Corps earlier, so we might sign up Jericho to,
Hey, if they need a chaplain.
That's, to see the world. And
Were you ever a chaplain, Pastor Wilson?
I was chaplain of the Buena Park Police Department,
Oh,
not in the Marine Corps.
when was that?
Yeah.
Goodness, it was back in the 70s.
70s.
I just asked because you're positionally located next to the base right there.
Yeah.
And I just wonder.
The pastor at the base there used to come to our church.
No.
They had a public pastor out there that used to come to our church.
Well, we are in our parable series that we've been going to, actually wrapping it up. We'll do another parable on Father's Day, but we're pretty much wrapped up with it. So I would love to talk with you, gentlemen, just about parables in general. Obviously, the specific one that you guys spoke to was the parable of the talents, or the 10 minas, depending on what translation you're looking at. But this is a pretty famous one, pretty popular one. I think a lot of people know about. And the series has been cathartic for me. I feel like some of our past podcasts I've kind of talked about when I was raised, growing up in the church. I don't know if it was just kind of where the church was at the time, but I remember parables were almost nitpicked for like every little metaphor or nuance, and it almost to the detriment of the main point of most of the parables. And it's been really refreshing going through the parables here at Neighborhood Church and just being like, okay, this is nice to really drill in on the point. And speaking of the parable that you guys preached on, this was one of those like, growing up, I would always feel like I'm the bad servant, who buried the things, and oh my goodness, what am I burying in my life? And certainly there's we can ask that of ourselves, but I like Jericho and your message. You preached at the Cypress campus, and I was there. I like how you said, what is the cost of discipleship, or what is the cost of following Jesus? And it's everything and nothing. And whenever there's a paradox or something like that, I love it, and it's really interesting. And I thought that was a cool getting to the kernel of it, where it kind of it took the focus off of the little kind of intricacies or delicacies and made it much more broad and accessible, at least for me. And so I'd love if you don't mind unpacking kind of your thoughts. And Mike, I would love to hear your take as well on the parable, and we can just kind of dive in. I'll let you guys arm wrestle for who wants to talk first.
I defer to my officers.
I looked at the parable and studied it from the fact that what the disciples were thinking, because they were looking obviously to when's it going to happen? When's Jesus coming? When's this kingdom going to start?
Right.
Yeah.
And they had a wrong idea about that. The kingdom wasn't like they thought it was going to be. The kingdom, Jesus says, is within us. And so, it's already here.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't mean it isn't going to be bigger, but it's already here. And so,
yeah. And that to me too, I think of Acts, right? Where Jesus is about to leave to go to heaven, and all the disciples are like, so is the kingdom coming now? They still didn't get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used Acts 1:7, where they said for that.
Right.
Yeah.
But then that also points me, what was I reading? Somewhere in John where Jesus blew on his disciples.
Oh, yeah.
And gave them the Holy Spirit.
Holy Spirit.
And I think they
sent them out, I think.
Yeah, and I think they kind of got it still, like, and it's like, thank you, Lord, that you're so patient with me. I don't get it right the first time, it's like, but
that's where they were too.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there were some of the things that Jesus taught them or said to them that they had no way of having any frame of reference for.
Yeah.
For instance, taking a cross.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't have any meaning for them until after the resurrection.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, just didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I took that, the beginning of the parable of Jesus saying, hey, you guys are expecting the kingdom that is going to be delayed. I took that, Pastor Wilson, and I could be wrong in that they were expecting a military takeover.
And you're right.
Right? Yeah. And Jesus is saying, no, I'm your Isaiah 52:53.
Yeah.
I'm coming in as the servant.
Yeah.
I can speak destruction over the temple. Like he did it 3 times, right? And he's saying, I'm coming to destroy sin by destroying me. And so I think he was also just kind of like telling them, like, you guys are expecting me to just come in my white horse, right? But
it's amazing that some of the Jewish leaders understood that someone had to be sacrificed. There needed to be a blood sacrifice. And Jesus really is saying on the cross, I'm going to take full accountability for your sin.
Yeah.
Which is mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take full responsibility for your sin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. To me, I latched on to the context that he was speaking to Zaccheause and his like criminal buddies, where I really took it to like, Lord, what were you trying to tell him? What were you trying to tell? Because Zaccheause quit as the chief tax collector.
Oh, yeah.
But he's throwing a party for the other tax collectors. What are you trying to tell him through this parable? And I think what he was trying to say is, you guys already work. Your employer sucks. The Roman employer. You're now a traitor among your own people.
Well, yeah, they were. That's why they were hated so much.
Right. And I think what he's trying to say is, you guys work for the wrong guy. Imagine if I was that benevolent king that actually gave you a mina, a 3-month advance. Imagine if you worked for me. And I know all of them did not want to work for him, right? They rejected the king.
Well, yeah, there was those that he said, we don't want you to be over us. It's like back in First Samuel, I think it is 7. He said they wanted. They didn't want God as king, and God told Samuel, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me.
Exactly.
So there's the same thing going on in the parable at the end of it. He said, bring in all those ones and kill them right before. And we hate to say this, but that is exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I call the pearly gate the gate of no debate.
Yeah. Tell me more about that one.
There's no debate there. There's no question there.
Yeah.
Who's coming in and who's staying, who's not.
Right.
Only those that are saved are coming in. Names written in the book of life. We always do that deal with what would we say?
What do you say? Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
But there ain't not going to be any questioning session there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good tactic to use in leading people to the Lord.
Right.
But that's not the way it's going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. St. Peter with his rooster is not going to ask you any questions at the gate.
No.
It's either you're in or out.
Yeah. I always like the story about guy that pastored over here built the big glass cathedral.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the Crystal Cathedral?
Yeah, Crystal Cathedral.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, he said he died and went to heaven and got there and they said, oh, all right, we'll get your records and we'll be right back. And about an hour later they come back and say, well, we haven't found him yet, but don't worry, you wouldn't be here otherwise. And finally, a couple hours later, St. Peter comes back and says, we finally found it, but it wasn't under preachers, it was under real estate.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
So to me, I took it as What is Jesus trying to tell Zaccheus and his people? And I loved it. I think you guys do communion. Do you do communion every Sunday?
No.
Or you used to?
Yeah.
They used to do it.
I love the tie-in because it's first Sunday for us that it was communion. And I couldn't get over...
too.
Oh, that's right. I couldn't get over the fact that what got Jesus in trouble was table fellowship with the tax collectors.
Yeah.
And we were doing communion.
Yeah.
And so for me, I was not quick enough, but that's where I was mentally of, do you guys understand that Jesus having fellowship and table fellowship with all of these sinners is what got him in trouble?
Even the one that was going to betray him.
Right?
And I think he washed his feet, too.
Exactly. Right? And we were doing communion.
Yeah.
You know, and so to me, it's like there's so much going on here.
Yeah.
But
When I like the context of Jesus presented this parable in the context or because of the sentiments, you know, or people were like, oh, the kingdom is coming at once and this is all going on. And it's great, you know, that Jesus addresses that specifically, you know, through this, you know.
Well, and true, he expects us to be doing kingdom work.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's what he expects. Whether they start out with 10 or 5 or 1,
Yeah.
he still expects some return on it.
When
The saying obedience is really what he's dealing with.
Yeah, and I liked in Jericho. I liked how you said, you know, at least the other servants were doing something, and the one that didn't do anything, you know, he wasn't even trying or wasn't even acting or doing. You know, he wasn't being obedient.
Yeah, what he
in
had
that
was
sense.
taken away from him.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think, and I don't know if it's a Western context or American context or whatever, it's like I get performance anxiety in the sense of like, am I going to be the bad servant because I'm not going to get a return on the investment? And I think that's kind of why I mentioned earlier, it's like to flip the parable on the head. It's not about that, am I good enough? I'm not going to do the right thing or I'm going to fail. It's more about trying or being a good steward or obedient, you know, not necessarily the results, although that's part of the parable, but it's more about, is my heart engaged
The parable,
in that way?
You know, I think the parable really teaches that when you are obedient, there is return.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
there is return.
Yeah. To me, it's even, I'm splitting hairs maybe too much, where they sent a delegation while the guy was away, and they said, we don't want him to be king.
Yeah.
But what do? They gave us a 3-month advance.
Yeah.
And so for me, I said, I almost called it the parable of parables, because I saw the parable of the 2 sons, you know, where the guy says, I'm going to do it and didn't. And the other one that says, I'm not going to do it, but actually did it. And the ones that said no at first, but still did it, is the better son, right? Like the parable of the vineyard, 2 sons in Matthew 13, where they could have sent a delegation and said, we don't want him to be king, but they're left with this 3-month advance of, he still told me to put it to work. What am I going to do? And so they put it to work, and then they're getting, even the math on it is amazing, isn't it? Like 1,000%. Like you went from 1 to 10. I don't know any investors that are that good, you know, or 1 to maybe if you have a lot of like kind of like a safety net, but at the end of the day, they obeyed, and they were called trustworthy. Something happened in them doing it, while the other guy's like, I'm not even going to try. Because actually, I think I'm trying to argue that had he tried and still failed, the king would still be pleased because he tried. But the fact that he didn't, he's just like, no, you're a wicked guy.
Well, and that's like the reference of you could have at least put it in a bank where that would be kind of like the base level of like, I'm not doing anything, but at least it got interest, you know?
Yeah.
Like, but that harkens to that idea of like, you didn't even try, you know, you didn't even have faith enough to invest it, you know?
Yeah. And I think it's all about your heart relationship to the king.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, really, Christianity is all about a relationship. That's the key to the whole thing.
Right.
And it's interesting that, you know, we go from the 10 Commandments, Old Testament, you know, Jesus says that, you know, he fulfills that, and instead of explicit commandments, that Jesus gives. I mean, although he does, give directives certainly, but a lot of his teachings are parables, are things that we need to sit and contemplate. Thou shalt not murder. Okay, I mean that's pretty specific, and we can get the context, and you can unpack, war versus peacetime. What does killing look like? But it's very specific, whereas something like, just Jesus parables in general, and maybe we can transition into that, your guys' thoughts of just this series in parables and how we've been looking at them. And I feel like over the past month or two, however long we've been doing this, I like how that we've been pointing out how Jesus is getting at the heart of people, and kind of whether it was the Pharisees listening to him, the disciples kind of asking him, who's going to be greatest, and in these situations, is a kingdom coming at once, like what's going on, and instead of saying, yes, it's here right now, or yes, it's coming, but you don't understand it, you don't see it. Jesus gives us a broader parable to kind of consider. And 2,000 years, we've been considering it. Humanity has been unpacking it and toying with it and struggling, but looking and following. And so it's just really, kind of neat.
Well, can I ask you a question, Pastor Wilson?
Sure.
Because this is my first parable that I taught. You've been in and out, you've been teaching. I guess the question that came up in my life group is, how do I stay close to Jesus? Like, learning all of these parables, like, what are some actual practical ways to help us stay close to Jesus? If it's all about the heart relationship with the King, like, what have you been learning or gleaning from that?
I think that it's a daily challenge. And so we start the day with the Lord, and that is the way we start. And then we end the day with the Lord too. But throughout the entire day, we're in constant contact with Him, of course, and that's the key to having a relationship. If you have a relationship with, if you have a friend that you hardly ever get to see or talk to, you haven't got much of a relationship with that person.
Right.
But if you have someone that you talk to on a regular basis, I mean, that's the key to the relationship.
Yeah.
And you talk, but you don't just talk. You listen. Listening is probably the most important part of prayer that there is. When we communicate with Him.
Yeah.
And He'll share with us.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have never heard the voice of Jesus, but I sure have been impressed by His thinking.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And what I heard you say is friendship too, because I have buddies that I call, and it's not always sunshine and rainbows. Like, I'm sharing, dude, I'm having a hard time this week. Yeah. Right? And I have to, if I'm constantly connected with God at the beginning and at the end of my day, it's not just it should be good, right? No, I'm having a hard day. Right?
We have hard days.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it is. I don't think God spares us any of the regular things in life.
Right.
In fact, we should be the best examples of how to handle those things.
True.
Because we have the one who created everything to go to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I was listening to something on TV last night. It was had to do with they were talking about creation, or it was eggs. It was modern marvels, and they're talking about chicken eggs and stuff like that. And it was just, they were saying, oh well, the chickens came along 5 million years ago, and I'm thinking, oh gee, drive me nuts with that stuff. I think that God gave, when God created the heaven and the earth, He gave it a look that if you know Him, you don't have any problems with it. But if you don't know Him, you'll think it's 1 billion years old.
Right. Yeah. There's something to marvel at looking at creation.
They ask the question, well, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well,
Yeah.
chicken had to come first because chickens make eggs.
Right, absolutely. Oh my goodness. Something you also said is you said, I don't hear his voice, but I love his thoughts.
Yes.
And I'm stuck in this. I'm reading a book on, it's called Friendship with God. Like, what does it mean to walk with the Lord in the wilderness? And there's this girl, she and her husband are church planters. And they finally said, you know what? We're ready to use our family savings. We got to launch this church. And they committed in their mind and in their heart, and they launched it. And guess what the timing was, Pastor Wilson and Sean? It was a pandemic. So there was nothing to launch out into. And so here she is. She's just like crying out to the Lord, and she's like, I'm done. I'm done. Like, I don't even know why we're doing this. Like, we're not meeting. We're at home, right? How do we disciple people? And the Lord brought a verse to her head. It's somewhere in Philippians. And she just goes, why are you trying to change the subject, God? I'm trying to tell you all my problems. And so she's like, sure, I'll read the verse. So she reads the verse. And basically her conclusion is, because of my friendship with the Lord, I actually need sometimes our conversation. I need the Lord to interrupt me talking to change the subject. Because his subject and his word, actually, that's what we need to talk about. We need to talk about that my strength is perfected in weakness, that I cannot do anything without Christ's strength. And anything I accomplish is rubbish, but I might gain Christ. And so she's like, sometimes we're like these kids making a tantrum with the Lord, but he's trying to say, no, I want to change the subject real fast. Like a good dad, right? I want to talk about this. I want to talk about how I'm sufficient and how I'm enough. And so I hear that from what you're saying of like, I don't hear his voice, but I hear his thoughts.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, we do. And I tell you, there's a great book that it's out of print, but you can get it if you go to like Christian discount books. And it's called The Table of Inwardness. Table of Inwardness.
Table of Inwardness. Uh-huh.
Yeah. And it is such a, it'll really give you some really tremendous insights into your time with the Lord. He talks about it. Calvin Miller's the author, and he talks about it as when we sit down in prayer it's like sitting down for a meal with the Lord. And he feeds us.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's
But it's well worth reading. It's only about that thick. It's not a big book.
Right.
But he is such a great communicator.
Yeah. I love that. And then going back to birds, we're making full circle now.
sweet.
There was a season in my life where I was complaining, Pastor Wilson. I was like, I'm reading my Bible, but I feel like I'm only getting crumbs. Okay? Like, I'm trying to be obedient. I'm reading, I'm following my lectionary, I'm following everything, but I'm walking away with crumbs. Like, what is going on, Lord? And we went on vacation to Hawaii. And so we're at this balcony. We're on the 23rd floor. But one of my favorite things to do was to take bread, our white bread, and break it up into crumbles. And like all the birds would come. Like the little robins would come. And that's when I felt a nudge from the Lord go, you think you want more. You can only handle crumbs. and so, do you know what I mean? Like, and the Lord's speaking to me about birds.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, thank you. Like even my provision of manna is a miracle. Like, don't complain. Like the manna is enough for today, right? Like you're asking for a buffet. I'm giving you the manna. You're the bird, and I'm just like, thank you.
Yeah, it's not the big stuff; it's the little stuff.
Speaking of friendship, I feel like a true friend would know, those times when they need to interrupt, or they would know when we want a buffet. But I'm the type, where it's like I eat a full meal, and then I'm like, I want another full meal, because this looks good too. Or I always have the problem when like I'll go to an event. but I'm hungry like during the day. And so it's like an hour or two before, and I'm like, I'm just so hungry. I'm going to eat I'll just eat a little something, but it's like, oh, I always eat like a full big sandwich or whatever it is. So I'll eat. And then I'm like, okay, now I got to go to this thing. And I know dinner's served, but it's like, I'll still just eat. So it's like, but a friend would be like, Sean, are you really going to like make yourself sick? Or you just need to, gracefully,
Right.
bow out of the dinner meal. But that's like, it's wonderful that God interacts with us in those ways, like he knows what we need, and but he's gracious too, and not like hammering us. I mean, sometimes we're hammered over the head, certainly, with some things in life, but he knows where we need to be talked to or met or challenged or given grace, in a situation.
There's the Gordon Lightfoot song.
Oh, yeah. Now you're speaking my language.
Is it Rainy Day People? Is that what it is? Always seem to know when you need a call. They know when you're hurting and stuff. Really, really, really good song. Not a secular song, obviously.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
That's so good. All that brings me to is when I used to run Awana, I would tell the kids, the elementary and younger, I said, what's a good friend? And I'd say it's a good friend. It's not just there for you in the good times, but it's the one that call you out on your bad behavior. Yeah. They love you enough to say, you're making the wrong choice, right?
Like a good choice.
And so to me, it's trying to disciple the kids and say, have some good friends that you can have fun with, but have better friends actually here at Awana, here at church, where they could say, hey, stop being a punk, dude. Like, or they're 16 years old, and right?
Accountability is one of the most important things we have.
That's a good call. Yeah.
We need to be accountable. That was, I always use the illustration of Gene Scott. Gene Scott was a brilliant guy, but he had no accountability. He was an entity unto himself, and he turned out to be the biggest mess going.
Gene Scott?
Gene Scott, yeah, he's not around anymore. He passed away, but he used to have this big church up in L.A. And he was the guy that sat there and told them if they didn't send any money, he wasn't going to teach.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And he had a big gathering there, but and the IRS, boy, they were after him all the time. Finally, they gave up. He beat them.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Master manipulator. It sounds like.
Yeah. They thought they were going to get him. He got them.
Yeah. That's right. See, this is where I thought Jesus was so brilliant, because everything about Jesus I always try to bring back to Sermon on the Mount. I'm an easy guy. I like simple things. Like if it gets complicated, I'm always like, what does he say at the Sermon on the Mount? That's probably that.
Yeah.
And so the problem with this parable for me was, pause, Jesus. Okay, I know you're teaching on you can only serve one master, right? Either God or mammon. And now you're telling me a parable about money? And so I was like, what are you doing? Like, you're telling me to serve God and not money, right? But then you're telling me a parable about be a good investor, and I just was, slow down. And I thought to myself, this is how you communicated with Zaccheause and his friends. This is how you talked to them. But then I'm like, why are you judging the guy? And so, but I keep going back to Sermon on the Mount. Like the tension of the money and the rich young ruler and Zaccheause and.
Well, he just used the example of being obedient to the Lord.
Yeah.
With the money, that was all it is.
Yeah.
And really, why people don't tithe is because they don't trust God. It's plain and simple. They don't trust God. And I guarantee you can't outgive God.
Yeah.
But you can have a lot of fun trying.
Yeah. Right. Something you said 2 Sundays ago. God always says something he always responds in prayer.
Oh,
and he says
he never says no.
Yeah.
He always says, I got something better.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right?
I got that from Charles Stanley.
Oh.
But it's the truth.
It's true.
The first time I heard it, I said, he's right on the money. Yeah, God doesn't say no to it. He just says, I got something better for you.
Right.
And he has to massage our thinking till we see it.
Right. Right.
And he's quite content to do that.
Right. Yeah. And I think to me, it's tied to the trust and money, because what we're saying when we don't trust God is, but what do we do? What do we do with this part? And it's actually enough for Jesus or God to say, yeah, but I have something better for you. Yeah. Right? Like, God, it's hard to tithe this much money. It's hard to give. Don't you know what I need? X, Y, and Z. And instead of waiting for the answer, God could also just say, but I got something better for you. Trust me with that 10%, or even the 1%. Trust me with the 1.
Yeah.
I got something better for you.
I had a letter. I typed up a letter and handed out to all my church members when I was pastoring in Cypress. I said, you tithe for 90 days. If you're not convinced at the end of 90 days that you're better off, I'll give you every dime back out of my bank account, not the church's.
Yeah.
I never
Wow.
lost a penny.
Wow.
Never lost a penny on that.
What a challenge.
Yeah.
And I heard an interesting statement one time. The guy said, it's a shame that tithing keeps some Christians from doing more for Jesus. They give the 10% of that. That's it.
Oh, like tithe. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
You can't. You can only give after you've done the 10%. Then you can give, over and above to other things.
Right.
But when we tithe, that's not directed at all. It goes right into the general fund.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I'll say this. I love millennials. I'm a millennial myself. Okay, we're the best and we're the worst of our kind. In that we have to figure out our relationship with institutions. If I can't submit to any authority or institution, absolutely I won't tithe. But I have to read my Bible and say, God said, right? And it's the parable. Will you obey? Will you put this money to work? Will you do it?
It all goes back to obedience.
Yeah. And so the millennials need to figure out, how do I really feel about institutions? How do I feel about the change in the world? How can I be part of the change? But also it goes back to coaching for me. I was having a conversation with a guy this morning, and he says football is about listening to your coach and doing it. And I think we come to the Lord like a millennial Christian. I heard what you told me, but do you know how I feel? Do you know all the nuance? God's like, I don't care about the nuance. I told you the instruction. Are you going to do it? Right? Like a coach is like, are you going to run this play? Or are you going to tell me how your ankle hurts or all? I don't, fill in the blank, but it's like the instruction has not changed. The directive has not.
I worked for a guy one time in a welding shop, and he had let one of the guys go who worked there, who was a really good welder. But I asked him. That was my first job. And I said, "How come you fired so and so?" And he said, "Well, it isn't that he wasn't a good welder. He just has more reasons for not doing what I wanted him to do than I have for him for doing." So I had to get rid of him.
Wow.
I'd give him a task, and he'd come up with some reason not to do it. So I said, "Yeah, I hadn't thought of that," but he was.
Wow,
said, "You're right."
That's a parable right there.
Yeah.
What a gift!
Yeah.
You learned that at your first job?
Yep.
I think that was more important than even just getting the first job.
Oh yeah. Yeah, he said the guy has more reasons for not doing what I want him to do than I
For keeping him.
for him doing it. So I had to get rid of him.
Right.
Well, guys, this has been a great conversation, and I know we got some things to do, but any closing thoughts for our listeners on just parables in general, this passage, because, like I said, we are wrapping up parables as far as our series.
I think keep them simple. Mm-hmm. The parables are simple. Don't try to make it say something it doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you're probably going to light right on the third rail.
Yeah. Yeah. Like that.
For me, I think it's just stay connected with Jesus.
Stay connected.
You know, if the parable's confusing, just like, Jesus, what are you trying to teach me? You know, but really, well, how do we stay connected with Jesus?
Mike, Jericho, thank you guys. Appreciate you guys joining us. We also appreciate those of you listening. We always love the feedback and hearing from you guys. So it's a joy to walk this journey together with our community. I encourage you, check out our YouTube pages, Neighborhood Church of Cypress or Neighborhood Church of Los Alamitos, to see Jericho or Mike's sermon from this past Sunday. Really hundreds of sermons at this point from the last handful of years. Also, we're on social media under those same handles. So if you guys want to stay up to date, we had a fun burger and bounce house time this weekend. We'll, I'm sure, do it a few more times through the summer. We got a lot of fun stuff coming up at Neighborhood Church too. Bible Day Camp is one of the big ones, so definitely stay tuned to that. Also, we love hearing from you guys. Any questions or comments that you have for us, you can email us at connect@neighborhoodchurch.com. That's CONNECT @neighborhoodchurch.com. Until next time, we pray that God will revive your soul.